בסדר?
כן, אנחנו יכולים להתחיל, אתה כוחוס.
תודה רבה. So, good morning, everyone. Let me just get the page ready. Sorry. Oh, sorry, the wrong one. Sorry, 1 minute, let me just get it. Oh, this is the one. No, Nusach Siyum. Ah, here we are. Okay. Okay, good morning, everybody. Okay, the last shiur which we gave, we spoke about the anointing of Shaul and how it took place. And we spoke about the 3 places which Shmuel sent Shaul. Okay, and we'll read it in the Psukim now. Okay, the Psukim say, ויקח שמואל את פח השמן, ויצוק על ראשו, וישקהו, and he kissed him, ויאמר הלא כי משכחה השם על נחלתו לנגיד. We spoke about that last week, the concept of a nagid, 2 weeks ago. And then he says the following, ולכתך היום מעמדי, when you'll go from me, ומצאת שני אנשים עם קברת רחל. And you're going to find 2 people by קבר רחל, בגבול בנימין. ואמרו אליך, and they'll say to you, נמצאו אתונות, the אתונות have found, אשר הלכת לבקש, and your father was more worried about you than the atonot. And then he's going to go to Bet El, and there they'll meet 3 people, each one holding 3 people, one holding 3 gedayim, the next one holding 3 loaves of bread, and the other one carrying a barrel of wine. And they'll say to you, Shalom Aleichem, and they're going to give you 2 loaves of bread. You'll take it. And then afterwards, you're going to go to the place where the Aron Kodesh is. And there, and this is the most important statement, and there you will become like a prophet. אחר כך תבוא גבעת האלוקים, אשר שם נצבי פלישתים, ויהיו כבואך שם העיר ופגעת חבל נביאים, and you'll meet a group of prophets, and they are prophesying. וצלחה עליך רוח השם והתנבאת עמם, and you're going to prophesy with them, ונהפכת לאיש אחר, and you're going to be somebody new. Now, what we're going to discuss the following. Okay, he goes to Kever Rachel. Why does he go to Kever Rachel? Why does Shmuel send him? Because Rachel was his great-grandmother. Comes from Binyamin. He wants Shaul to connect to his past. He then goes to Bet El. And what happens in Bet El? Bet El was the place where Yaakov Avinu sees the Malachim going up and down. The connection between heaven and earth. Hashgacha. The Malachim going up and the Malachim going down. And that is the idea of Bet El. And he gives him 2 loaves of bread. Now, why does he give him loaves of bread? What specifies, what is so special about the bread? And the answer to that is because bread represents 2 things, 2 ideas, 2, in actual fact, contradicting ideas. What do we mean by that? What are the 2 contradicting ideas? The word lechem comes from the word milchama. The first battle which takes place between Cain and Hevel is a battle about food. Parnasah. How You have your physical existence, what you eat from. And we all know battles take place over finances, over economy, etc., etc., etc. That is one idea of lechem. The other idea of lechem is what we use in modern Hebrew, lahalchim, to fuse, to join together. When you want to malchim something, when you want to join two metals, you heat them up, they join and they become fused. Lechem is a fusion between heaven and earth. That which comes down from heaven, water, and that which grows from the ground, wheat. And lechem is the ideal concept of divine providence. And that is why Shmuel tells him that this is what you're going to see. You're going to meet two people in Bethel. Bethel represents divine providence. Yaakov Avinu sees the Malachim. And he also tells him, you're going to feel it. You're going to feel the divine providence in two separate ways. You're going to be responsible for the wars, for defending the Jewish people. And you have to represent yourself. You have to represent the idea of being a king as somebody who joins heaven and earth together, because that is the concept of a melech. Now, Shaul, in actual fact, does these things. Shaul fights against the enemies, and he does manage to a certain extent to communicate this idea of representing HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's why a melech goes around with the Sefer Torah. He goes around with the Sefer Torah the whole time because he joins heaven and earth together. That is Bet-El. And now we come to the last concept. The last place which he visits is the place of where the Aron Kodesh is. And here we're going to learn a beautiful idea of Abrabanel in line number 32. Va'ot HaShlishi, where it's written hey in brackets, line number 32. Va'ot HaShlishi, hu sheyavo givat ha'elokim, etc., etc. And in line number 35, the he Kiryat Ye'arim, that is Kiryat Ye'arim. Kisham haya Aron, that's where the Aron was, Sheshavu Plishtim, which the Plishtim captured. V'hayu b'nei nevi'im talmidei Shmuel, asher limdam, who Shmuel taught them, asher limdam, v'hidricham, he directed them, v'hichinam, and he prepared them, the kabel hashefa hanvu'i, the influence of prophecy. Sorry, 1 minute. Sorry, guys. Okay. Shefa nevu'i. Olim shama litboded ulitnabe. They go there to become alone and prophesy. Besibat, because of the Aron Elokim which was there. Vayalif nehem Chalil v'Nebel b'chino, and they played musical instruments. V'hemam inabim. רוצה לומר שהיו מכינים עצמם בשמחת אותם הניגונים. ואמר בכאן מתנבאים אין פירושו משבחים, אבל עניינו שמכינים עצמם ומתבודדים להינבא, כי מתנבאים ובניין התפעלה מהנבואה. You become a prophet. And Shaul joins this group of people. And he becomes a prophet. And let's learn V'amru. Salcha alav ruach Hashem v'hitnabeta. You will become a prophet. V'nehafachta li'ish acher. Perush etzli sheyatzliach alav ruach Elokim. The Spirit of God will come upon him. V'hu haratzon, the desire, the will and the desire to prophesy. Umiyad v'hitnabeta imam. He wants to say, Titasek linaveh. You will want to begin to profit. And this is what he'll achieve. He'll become somebody new, a king becomes a prophet. Because the whole idea of a king is this idea of a connection between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and man. And then in line number 52, ואחרי ששלושת האותות האלה אמר שיעשה כל אשר תמצא ידו, כי האלוקים עמו, God will be with him. רוצה לומר שיעשה גבורותיו, he will be able to overcome the enemies, וינהיג את ישראל and lead עם ישראל, לפי שהעזר אלוקי דבק בו, because the assistance of God is glued to him, is fused. Now, I want to go for 1 minute to speak about this idea, because this idea, which is written in the book of Shmuel, is the first time ever we have a description of how prophecy begins. What is a prophet? We never know what a prophet is. We don't know. We've got no idea of this sense of communication, this media. But the Rambam, when he wants to describe to us the concept of a prophet, he explains the following. Line number 60. Miyesodei Hadat. It is one of the foundations of our religion. We all know that in the 13 principles of faith, this is the 7th principle. Miyesodei Hadat. Leida, that we have to know. Shakel, God, menabeh et bnei Adam. He prophesies, he gives the power of prophecy to people. Ve'ein hanvuah chala, and prophecy doesn't rest, ela al chacham gadol, a wise person, b'chokhmah, gibor b'midotav. He is somebody who has got exceptional qualities. V'lo yeh yitzro mitgaber alav, b'davar ba'olam. Elahu mitgaber b'da'ato al yitzro. He is constantly has the ability to overcome his yitzarim. V'hu ba'al da'at rechavan nechona ma'od, in his great knowledge. Adam shu memula b'chol hamidot ha'elu shalem. Therefore, who is the person who has the ability to prophesy? According to the Rambam, the person who has the ability to prophesy is somebody, first of all, who's a chacham, and he's got midot, qualities, spiritual qualities. And then, ube'et, at the time, shetanuach alav haruach, when this Spirit of God falls upon him. That means all of a sudden, he will feel something strange, something peculiar, something where you go into a trance. Titarev nafsho, his soul will get mixed up, will combine. B'ma'alat hamlachim anikraim ishim. V'yehafech le'ish acher. He will be a different human being. V'yavin b'da'ato she'ino kumot shahaya. He'll understand things in a different perspective. Ela shenit ala. He won't be the same. He'll understand new perspectives. Ela shenit ala al ma'alat shar b'nei adam ha'chachamim, kumo shene'emar b'Shaul, the same way it's written by Shaul, v'itnabeta imam v'ne'efachta le'ish acher. The Rambam doesn't find any other sentence in the whole of the Tanakh to explain the direction and what happens to a person when he receives prophecy. This, in actual fact, is the only time in the Tanakh where we have a description of what happens to the human psyche when a person receives prophecy. He won't be the same person. He won't be the norm. He'll be different. Now, I just want to finish off this section, and then you can ask me what you want. An idea which one of the great Rishonim, the Ran, explains also. And this is connected to the story of Moshe Rabbeinu, when Moshe Rabbeinu is speaking to the 70 elders. And he says the following, וזה כעניין מה שאמר השם יתברך למשה ב70 זקנים, וירדתי, and I will come down. V'dibarti im chasham, and I will speak to you. V'atzalti min haruach asher alecha, and I will, v'atzalti, what's the translation? I will move over from your spirit to somebody else. That means you take like a candle, and from a candle, you can take another flame. The candle never gets extinguished. It remains the same candle. But the power of fire is that what? That however much you take from that original fire, that fire will always exist. That is the source. And therefore, they didn't deserve it. Since Moshe Rabbeinu had it, they were all moved towards him. And because of him, the others were able to get prophecy. And that's what happens exactly with Shmuel. Shmuel has the ability to transfer some of his powers of prophecy to other people, and the other people will transfer it to Shaul. That means it's like a sort of a system whereby one gives the other and the other gives the other and pass it on. Prophecy is something where if you have the original source of prophecy, and that carries on. And that's why Shaul had to go to the Aron HaKodesh. He had to go there, because there the Aron HaKodesh is in actual fact the source of spiritual powers. From there, Shaul meets prophets, and Shaul receives the power of prophecy from them, and he becomes like that. That, Rabotai, is the initiation of Shaul. Past, present, future. Past, Kever Ochel. Present, Bet El, divine providence. Future, Aron HaKodesh and prophecy. That's what happens to Shaul. That's where Shmuel sends him on this journey of initiation. Right, Rabotai. If there are any questions, please ask, because now we're moving on. Yes, Harold.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay. So what happened to this power of prophecy down the road with regard to the Melech? I mean, we don't, at least I don't know, even David HaMelech, I'm not sure that we...
David HaMelech is called a Navi.
He is, okay.
He is called a Navi, and Shlomo HaMelech is a Navi.
And
Shlomo HaMelech, HaKadosh Baruch Hu appears to him, okay, when the consecration of the, what's it called? The consecration of the Beis HaMikdash. Okay, right. Hashem speaks to him. Okay, after that, the lower the people, the lower the kings go, the more they get, their spiritual standards go down, prophecy disappears from them. Okay?
Would you say that Shlomo HaMelech would be the last?
Shlomo HaMelech was the last prophet, last king who was a prophet. Correct. 100%. Okay? There are two functions which create. There is the spiritual standing of the human being and the spiritual standing of the nation. The two go in parallel. If you have a Beis HaMikdash, you still have powers of prophecy. Beis HaMikdash disappears, then prophecy goes down. The last prophets were the ones who was still connected to the first Beis HaMikdash and at the beginning of the second Beis HaMikdash. Malachi is the last of the prophets, okay? And Shei Knesset Agdola. Those are the last ones. Again, Beis HaMikdash is not the same. People aren't the same. And therefore, everything changes. It is a function, prophecy is a function of two distinct or three distinct criteria. The first criteria is Beis Hamikdash. Second criteria is the standing of the human being. Third criteria is the standard of the nation. That is prophecy. That's what we know. Okay. Anybody else? Any questions? Okay. So now we're going back to Shaul. Shaul goes through this initiation process. Okay. Now let's see what happens. Okay. Let's go back to the beginning. Oh, sorry. Okay. Now, Shaul, after going all through this process, sorry, 1 minute, I made a mistake. Sorry, share screen. Now, let's go back. All this was done in private. Nobody knows about this. Nobody knows why Shaul goes through this initiation process except he himself. Because when Shaul tells him this, tells him in a private way. And even when Shaul goes home, it's written in the Tanakh that they all are asking him, what's happened to you? And he doesn't say a word. Why doesn't he say a word? Because basically Shmuel has told him that I want to publicize it. Okay? The power of keeping a secret. Okay? Shaul doesn't say a word, not to his parents, not to his wife, and we know Shaul is married because Yonatan is already born. He doesn't say to his wife, he doesn't say a word. Okay? He keeps it. And then what happens? Shmuel gets the whole of the Jewish people together, or their main representatives. And he begins casting lots. Who is from where the tribe, who is going to be the king? And through the process of the lots, the Goral, it's written in line number 85, Vayakrevet Shevet Binyamin. And Shevet Binyamin comes out. Lemishpachto, lemishpachotav. Vatilaked, and the next one was Mishpachat Hamatri, the family of the Matri. Vayilaked Shaul ben Kish. And the one who comes out in the lot is Shaul. Vayivakshuhu velo nimtza. Now Shaul is there, but he doesn't come out. He doesn't feel himself ra'ui, befitting to become the king. Vayishalu od b'Hashem, and they ask Hashem. They start davening to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Haveh od halom ish, bring forth this man. Vayomer Hashem, hu hinei hu nechba el hakeli. He's hiding. He doesn't want to come out. He does not want to come out. He doesn't deserve it. Vayarutsu, and they begin running. And they eventually find him. Vayikacheu misham, he's taken there by force. They schlep him on. Rabbi say they have to pull Shaul. Even though HaKadosh Baruch Hu has said, he is the man, he is the guy. Shaul doesn't want it. And what happens? Vayityatzeh b'toch ha'am. And they eventually convince him, and he stands amongst the people. Vayigva mikol ha'am mishichmo lemala. He appears so much more important than anybody else. Taller, etc. He's got the appearance of a king. Vayomer Shmuel. el kol ha'am. Hara'item. Okay? You've seen. Asher bachar bo Hashem. Hashem has chosen him. Ki ein kamohu b'chol ha'am. I promise you, if Hashem has chosen him, then there's nobody like him in the whole of the Jewish people. Vayareu kol ha'am, and all the people cheered. Vayomer, and they shouted out, Yechi hamelech. Let the king, right? The king should live. Right. Long live the king. Yeah. Vayidaber Shmuel al ha'am et mishpat ha'melucha. And Shmuel explains to the people what it means to be having a king. Vayichtov basefer. And they write a contract. That means all the things, and let's take note of this importance. You have accepted upon yourself the king. These are the conditions which you have accepted. That means Shmuel tells them, listen, a king can do this and a king can do that, and he can take from the army, and if he needs money, etc., etc., etc. I'm not saying he's going to do it, but according to the Torah, he's allowed to. And all this is in a contract. Vayanach lifnei Hashem. And this contract is put in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That means, so to speak, it has the sealing of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has chosen through Shmuel, Shaul as a king. Vayishalach Shmuel et kol ha'am ish lebeito. And Shmuel sends everybody home. V'gam Shaul alach lebeito givata. And Shaul also goes to his house. And the people who felt close to him, who HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so to speak, enable these people to connect to him, they also were with him. Right. But what do you have? Uvnei B'li'alam. And there were some rotters. B'nei B'li'al, there were some rotters. There were guys who really, really felt that Shaul wasn't the correct, and they made fun of him. Ma Yoshienu zeh, this guy is going to save us. Vayivizuhu, and they shamed him up. Velo heviu lo mincha, and they didn't bring him anything. They ignored him totally. That means because the majority of people all went up to Shaul, all the leaders, and they gave him a mazel tov, and they gave him a kvitzel, like they go in front of the Rebbe, etc., etc., etc. And these people, in an outright fashion, totally ignored him. Now, he was the king. What was his reaction? His reaction was, Vayehi kamachrish. Kept quiet. Right. That is the introduction in the first chapter, in chapter Yud of Shaul. Right. Any questions until now?
Yes.
Yes, Harold. 1 minute. Let me get out of stop share. Right. Yes.
Okay.
Please ask.
Yeah, 2 questions. What you just read, this, although you can tell chronologically, occurs after Shmuel anointed him, after he sent him to the
initiation process. There were 2 stages. Let me just say, there was a stage of the private anointing, and there was the public recognition, which HaKadosh Baruch Hu does in front, Shmuel does in front of everybody. 2 distinct.
Yeah, but so the reaction of Shaul doesn't make any sense at all, since he's already been initiated by Shmuel as you know, as the king, as a prophet. So it doesn't make any sense. That's number 1. And number 2 is, and maybe you've discussed this before, is the idea that he comes from the Shevet of Binyamin.
Right.
and not Yehuda.
Right.
And that seems to also be inconsistent, at least with the Masorah and the tradition, that Malchut, I can't remember exactly the bracha of Yaakov to Yehuda.
Lo yasur shevet miYehuda.
Okay.
Right.
So both of those things seem very inconsistent.
Right. Very good, Harold. You've hit the nail on the head. Okay. Now, Shaul doesn't want to be a king. HaKadosh Baruch Hu's pushed it on him. Okay. That is the first thing. Okay. He doesn't want it. And he feels that, especially after there were people who were opposing him, who could have been from Yehuda, okay, because perhaps they had the Masorah, it's not written there. Therefore, he feels that the people aren't ready, like a division in the king in the country. And Shaul doesn't want yet to make himself the chief. Okay, Binyamin, the smallest tribe. Are the people ready for it? Okay. Now, is this a failing in the personality of Shaul? It could be. We will see later on. That means Shaul looking, what do the people really want? And that is why it is so important when the Navi describes by Hika Macharish, he keeps quiet. Is that a positive trait or a negative trait? We will see later on. Okay. So therefore, we're not talking about, okay, a person who is like in the olden days, the what's it called? The stronger the guy, the one who's going to be the king. We always, you know, so to speak, picture ourselves, the kings, as people who were the head of the tribes. They could bash up everybody. They could kill everybody. They were the strongest. Everybody was scared. The Navi's concept is not that. It's not a king, in actual fact, who is the one who's the most powerful person, etc., etc. It appears to be exactly the opposite. Okay? And that's what the Torah is telling us. The Navi is telling us who is the true king. The true king is somebody who in his own special way has the ability to consolidate the nation. And it takes time before everything is ready. Okay, I'll give you an example, Harold, and everybody. Okay, somebody new is appointed as a rabbi of a shul. Okay, now how does he do it? Does he start on the first Shabbos giving Musa, fire and brimstone, and this and the other, what you're doing wrong, etc., 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 and telling everybody off? Or what does he do? He begins to speak to people slowly and build up the people's confidence in him. Now, years ago, Rabbi Isai, anybody who was chosen automatically created that authority. 20th century doesn't exist. If a rabbi will come to any shul the first day and start giving Musa, they'll get tomatoes thrown on him. Correct, Norman? Right? That's it. You don't stand a chance. This is the way Shaul behaved. He wanted his authority to be built up, because that is the nature of a king of Am Yisrael. It's built up like a Talmid Chochem. You don't become a Talmid Chochem, okay? The Chofetz Chaim never became a Chofetz Chaim when he was 30 years old. He was 90 or 80 when he became the Chofetz Chaim. Okay, the leader of the Jewish people. Okay, you slowly build yourself up and you create it. You create it with interpersonal relationships and the way you behave and the way you speak, etc., etc., etc. And that's what Shaul believed. Okay, and that teaches us, in actual fact, is authority there, or do you create your authority? Right. Shaul therefore behaves in the most what's it called? The best possible way, the way he thinks, because that's his nature. His nature is not authority. He's humble. Who am I? Right. So how does he get there? And that is the next chapter. Okay, Harold, you with me? If you got any problems, please say. Guys, don't be shy. Okay, because here we're teaching us, the Navi is teaching us, in actual fact, the depths of authority, the depths of creating authority. Now, let's go. What happens? Line number 100. Vayal Nachash Amoni. Nachash, the king of Ammon. Okay, now we're talking about the east bank of the Jordan. Vayachan al Yavesh Gilad. He plans to attack Yavesh Gilad, the towns on the other side of the Jordan. Vayomru kol anshe Yavesh Gilad. Kel Nachash kirei lanu brit v'na'avtecha. Let's make a covenant with Nachash, and we'll pay taxes to him. Right? We're willing to become subject. We don't any wars. So what does Nachash say? Vayomer aleim Nachash Amoni. I'll do a deal with you. Bezot echrot lachem v'nikul lachem kol ayin yamini. I'll only do it if you allow me to cut out one of your eyes, and that will be a sign that you're a slave to me. V'samtiach cherpa al kol Yisrael. Right. You and me, you want to pay taxes, you don't want to fight. I'm the boss. These are my conditions. Rabbi say everybody's right eye is going to be cut out. Vayomru elav ziknei Yavesh. And the people of Yavesh Gilad said, Heref lanu shivat yamim. Give us 7 days, and we'll decide whether we want to fight against you. V'nishlecha malachim. And we will send messages all around. B'chol gvul Yisrael. Ve'ein me'en moshea otanu. And if nobody will come and save us, v'yatzanu elecha. We'll got no choice. We'll agree. Right. They contacted Shmuel, and Shmuel sends them to Shaul. Shaul plans the attack. Vayihi, okay, we're jumping 7 sentences. Okay, how Shaul plans the attack. Vayihi mimochorat is the following day. Vayasem Shaul et ha'am shalosh rashim. And he divides up the people into 3 groups. Vayavo b'toch ha'machaneh b'ashmoret haboker, and they came out early in the morning. Vayaku et Ammon, and they smote Ammon ad chom hayom until midday. Vayihu ha'nashirim vayafutzu, and they all scattered. V'lo nashiru bam shnayim yachad. Shaul manages to create his authority by, in actual fact, creating an army, planning out the attack, and then all the people now have accepted him. What happens? Vayomer ha'am el Shmuel. People go back to Shmuel, and they say, Mi ha'omer Shaul yimloch aleinu? Who were the people said? Who were those who said, what? Shaul will rule over us? Tnu ha'anashim v'nemitem. We want to kill them now. Those Bnei Belial in line numbers 97, who had the chutzpah to come and say, what, this is Shaul, what, he'll save us? We want to kill them now. Vayomer Shaul. What does Shaul say? Lo yumat ish b'yom hazeh. Nobody is going to get killed. Nobody. Not those who shamed me up, not those who pushed me aside, all those people who didn't want me. Nobody's going to do it. Why? Ki hayom asa Hashem shua b'Yisrael. Today's a Chag. On the day of a Chag, the day when HaKadosh Baruch Hu saves us, HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to live and not to die. That is Shaul. Okay? He knows he's managed to create the authority. He's done it in his own special way. He manages to create all the people to follow him. And then the final stages of Shaul becoming king is the following. Vayomer Shmuel el ha'am, lechu v'nelcha Gilgal unechadesh sham hamlucha. Okay, let us create a new type of government. Now that the people have come behind you, וילכו כל העם הגילגל, וימליכו שם את שאול לפני השם בגילגל, ויזבחו שם זבחים שלמים לפני השם, וישמח שם שאול וכל אנשי ישראל עד מאוד. Shaul was happy. He manages to create an environment of being a king. So therefore we have 3 initiations. The first one, the private one. The second one, Nechemya Melech. The third one is after the first battle. Ask the Abra Benel, says the Malbim, in line number 25, the following. Vayome Shaul, aval Shaul heishiv, lo yumat ish biyom hazeh, ki ad ata lo haya dinam k'mored b'malchut. There cannot be a system of rebelling against the king, achar she'adayin lo hodu kulam b'malchuto, until every single Jew has accepted me being a king. Ad shoshiam me'amon, until he succeeded saving them from Ammon. V'zeh lo nasa ad hayom. V'zeh she'amar, ki hayom asem tshuva v'ad ata lo haya li din melech. I haven't got a proper din of a king. Why haven't I got a din of a king? Because I wasn't democratically anointed. There were still people who were against me. And in order to have malchut in Klal Yisrael, everybody has to agree. Everybody. Before you can put a rebel, somebody who's mored b'malchut, against a king, every single person has to say, I want a king. And therefore, umitam ze amar Shmuel, sheilchu lechadesh melucha mechadash, al yedei kabbalat ha'am oto birtzonam, ba'ofen she'yatchil hamlucha mehayom. Now, Rabbi Sai, from here we learn an amazing concept. And it's something which we've spoken about when we learned the first chapter of Yoshua, about 3 years ago. Phil's looking at me. When we started Yoshua, we spoke about the pasuk, the following sentence. They said the following. Let me just get it enough to read it. Written in the beginning of Yoshua, the Haftarah of Simchat Torah, it's written there the following. It says, okay, right. Vayanu et Yoshua, and they answered Yoshua, the people, and they said, Kol asher tzivitanu na'aseh, whatever you will tell us, we will do. Bet kol asher tishlachenu nelech, wherever you send us, we will go. Kol asher shamanu el Moshe, the same way as we listen to Moshe, ken nishma elecha. Raki Hashem alecha imach kasher ya Moshe. And then the people say, Kol asher yamre et picha, anybody who rebels against you, v'lo yishma et dvarecha, yumat. The din of mored b'malchut is a function of the people. It's not something which stems from authority. the people give authority to the king, saying that anybody who rebels against you, you have got the right to kill him. But the authority stems from the people. Naaseh v'nishma. In order that HaKadosh Baruch Hu could be our king, we have to say, Naaseh v'nishma. Yoshua could only be a king once the people said to him, Naaseh v'nishma. Shaul could not be a king. The concept of melucha stems from the people giving the authority to the king. It doesn't come down from the king downwards. It comes from upward, downward, from the people below giving the authority to the king. And that's why Shaul has to be sure that in order that he can be the proper king, have I got the authority of the people. Now, this is what Shaul was waiting for. And he goes through a process. The process of HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanting him privately, Shmuel choosing him privately, HaKadosh Baruch Hu choosing him through the lots, and finally, the choice of the people. But the people have to be convinced that Shaul can be the true leader of the Jewish people. And that answers your question, Harold. I think that is the way Shaul builds his melucha. It's a fascinating insight. And you will see that the problem of Shaul is exactly that. Do I have the authority of the people? And his whole life was a life of, do I have that authority? Those were his worries. Now, on the one hand, we understand it. Are the people behind me? Okay, to give ourselves a good example, a good basketball team or a good football team or a good American soccer team will only really bring out their greatness if they have the true supporters. A team which doesn't have supporters, they don't stand a chance. Okay, so therefore it's based on two sides, the supporting system and the players, the king and the people. And here are boys side, the balance of power. And now we'll see how the Ralbag, Rabbi Levi ben Gershon, develops these ideas in a fascinating way. Let's start off. If there are any questions, please ask, because now we're going down to the nitty-gritty of this idea, these concepts.
Yeah.
Yes.
I just wanted to know the name Nachash Amoni. Does the name Nachash as name occur somewhere before? Because, or is it because the guy was like a Nachash?
He was like a Nachash. He was like a Nachash, but perhaps I don't know. I didn't go into that. No, he was a Nachash. What? Right. Let's go one stage further. Yes, Norman.
In verse 8, it says that Shaul managed to get 300,000 people, and then it superfluously adds, and Yehuda sent 30,000. In other words,
Yeah.
Yehuda, his rivals, were supported from the start. Why?
Because the people realized to fight against Nachasha and Moni, they need to send as many soldiers as possible. Yehuda wasn't his, there were people from Yehuda, but the people realized they need a king. Okay?
Even
Right.
that wasn't from their shepherd. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Sure.
Right. Yes, Mitch.
Just a comment. The ending of Perek Yud by Hikam Harish, a lot of people think is very strange. And I heard a very interesting shiur a number of years ago where they found a Dead Sea Scroll copy of the Tanakh, and it's Vayhim Kamei Chodesh, and it's the beginning of Perek Yud Aleph, and not the end of Yud of Perek Yud.
Wow. Okay. But we'll see that Chazal didn't have that. Okay, I haven't checked in Da'at Mikra. I'll check it up. I'll see if I can find something about it. Wow. Okay. Let's Let's go one stage further. Okay, I want to learn with you one of the ideas which the Ralbag, Rabbi Levi ben Gershon, does is at the end of every section, he will ask, what do we learn from all these stories? Okay, and he wants to give us different insights into the stories, not the pshat, but the lessons. And what we're going to learn is we're going to learn 4 or 5 lessons which he sees in this whole story of the initiation of Shaul. Let's go into it now. And what he calls it is to'elet. What do you gain from these stories? And he says the following. Ulam, line number 135. Ulam hato'elet hamagiot, hato'alot hamagiot, mizeh hasipur em eil. What do we learn from them? And you can see he's got 22 at least. The first one, Harishon, Lodia, Shera'ui Lashalem. It's really befitting for a perfect person, Sheyidakdek Banagat Banav. The person has to be particular, bringing up his family in the correct way. Ba'ofen shetieh ba'ofen hara'ui. V'lo yakel mizeh mipnei rov tirdato b'hanagat ha'am. And he shouldn't take away this important, very, very important part of his life, his children, on the account of his job as leader of the people. Halotir says the Ralbag. Mashe kara li Shmuel. What happened to Shmuel? Ba'avo shelo dikdek ba'agnagat banav, shetiyeh, lefi ha'ra'ui. V'zo b'zeh shezeh haya siba, shesar ha'memshala mizaro, ונמשך מזה ששאלו להם ישראל, מלך שהיה סיבת בסוף לגלות ישראל מעל אדמתם. And because of that, just imagine to ourselves, the Ralbag, if Shmuel's children would have been great people, we never would have needed a king. Prophets would have basically looked after the Jewish people. But what happens? Shmuel's children don't. And since they don't, they had to anoint a king. And once you've got a king, you don't know how he's going to behave. And look through the history of the kings, and you'll see exactly what happened. So therefore, v'kazeh ba'atzmo kara le'eli. The same thing happened to Eli HaKohen. Shelo dikdek ba'anagat banav lefi ha'ra'ui zeh. Ki zeh haya siba shemetu banav. V'sara mibeit Eli basof ha'inyan ha'kehuna ha'gdola. That's what happens to Eli HaKohen. And you can say the same thing about Moshe, etc., etc., etc. Says the Ralbag, a very important lesson. Man's responsibility, whatever his job is, or whatever leadership profession he has, his first and utmost responsibility is to his family. Shmuel fails, Eli fails, etc. That is the first insight of the Ralbag on this story. Now we're jumping. Believe me, I went through all of them in order to pick out the ones which I felt necessary to teach you, to learn with you, not teach you. Ha'esrim, the 20th one. Lodia, shera'ui shetieh lashalem, the perfect person, midat ha'gvura, the ability to fight. Bimkomot ha'ro'im, lahatzil lanirdafim, shehem me'amo, to look after the people who are downtrodden of his people. A leader needs to look at his people, that they shouldn't be downtrodden. Ulezeh siper ha'pulot Shaul, על עניין נחש המוני. ואף על פי שלא היה ישראל נוהג בו עדיין כמנהג המלך. Even though the people didn't recognize him as king, וגם הוא לא היה נוהג בעצמו מנהג המלך. He also didn't. But what happens? He feels responsibility. Shaul, Shmuel, has anointed him. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has chosen him. Have the people? Kacha kacha. Not really. There were plenty of people against him. But Shaul realizes that this is the expectancy from Shmuel. This is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu expects him. And he goes ahead, even though he knows that not all the people are behind him. Next, ה-21, להודיע שאין ראוי למהר על המתת נשים. Don't kill people. The Ralbag is talking also about his generation, where the Inquisition and the Goyim, they killed off people just like that, without any problems. Life was unimportant. And what does he say? No. Ra'ui li shamer mizeh kefi yacholet. You got to stop it. As much as you can, you save people. Ulezeh siper shelo iskim Shaul sheyamutu anashim asher bizau. Those people who shamed him up in public, no, we're keeping them alive. We don't kill people just for nothing. Even though they shamed me up, okay, the concept of life. Now, in the period of the Ralbag, or the periods before that, life was cheap. It was meaningless. And here we learn that Shaul, even though he was anointed by Shmuel and anointed by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he doesn't do it. Now comes the last one. ה-22, the 22nd insight. הוא שראוי למלך שיהיה באופן שיראו ממנו אנשים. The people should be a bit scared of him. ולפי שלא נתחדש על בחירת שאול דבר, יביא בלב האנשים שהוא כמו בריאה חדשה. ולזה לא היה דומהם למלך, וגם הוא לא היה נוהג כמנהג המלך. That means because the people weren't ready to have a king, Shaul doesn't behave as a king, and the people don't behave. והנה סבר שמואל. And therefore Shmuel decides to do it. לחדש המלוכה לפני השם בגלבל, ולזבוח שם על זבחי שלמים לפני השם. ליישב בליבם, to settle in their hearts, שהוא כמו בריאה חדשה. He's like a new human being. Shaul now is like somebody new. ויביא זה אל שיראו ממנו כראוי. And people should begin having the awe in front of Shaul. ולזה ידמה שאמר חנה. Now this is an unbelievable insight. The Ralbag connects this up to the first prophecy in Sefer Shmuel. What does Chana say? V'yiten oz lemalko. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has got to give strength, power to the king. When does this power occur, this oz? Ki ad shenatan lo Hashem yit'aleh et בעניין מלחמת בני עמון, לא היה במדרגת מלך. Until Shaul was the Gibor, was full of Oz, he can't be a king. That means HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives Oz to the king. The king has to show Oz, power. And that the people realize only after he stands up for them, he manages to conquer, and he manages to win the battle against Nachash Ammoni. And once that takes place, then the picture of a king begins to unfold. That, Rabbi Sai, is pshat. Pshat, how we learn it. But what we're going to do now is we're going to give an additional insight of Chazal. Because Chazal see this in a different way. What do they say? Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav, Mipnei ma ne'enash Shaul. Why was Shaul punished at the end of his days? Why? Mipnei shemachal al kvodo. He was moichel on his honor. Shneimar uvnei Belial amru ma yishienu ze bivazu velo heviu lo mincha vayika macharish. Uchtiv vayal nachash amoni vayechan al nachal yavesh, al yavesh Gilad. The story of Nachash Amoni is like a punishment to Shaul. You kept quiet. You kept quiet. Because of that, I'm going to bring upon you a battle. Chazal see this in a different, and what Harold asked before, this is, what is the relationship between the two chapters, the stories? Chazal see this in a different way. Let's learn Rashi. Ne'enash Shaul, lavo lidei davar she'alav nital mimenu malchuto. The seed of the failings of Shaul begin exactly then. Macharish, keeps quiet. Mipnei shemitchilat malchuto machal al kvodo. V'gila al atzmo, he revealed to himself, she'eno kedai limloch. I'm not the one who's going to be king. Says Rabbeinu Yerucham of Mir, one of the great mashgichim, is the following: Hu davar mavhil mu'od. This is an extremely difficult concept. To Shaul HaMelech, migodel tzidkuto v'chasiduto machal. Now, why does he mochel? He shouldn't have been mochel. Mibli lechakot shivakshu mimenu mechila. I'm moichel before the other people ask my mechila. Has Shaul got the right to be moichel on his honor if the other people haven't been mevakesh mechila? Rabbi, if somebody's done something bad to you, you don't have to be moichel until the other person asks mechila. Once they've asked mechila, then you can, what's it called? But before that, if I've got a problem with somebody, and somebody insulted me, I don't have to mochel him. וכשמגודל צדקותו וחסידותו מחל מבלי לחכות שיבקשו ממנו מחילה. נענש על זה. He was moichel too quickly, and he was punished because of that. שנתלה ממנו מלכותו. והוא, משום דמשפט, הרי מידה בשאר מידות. Mishpat, fairness, judgment, is just like a normal midah. Uvitur kol dehu b'mishpat, and anything which you give up in the framework of mishpat is a pgiya b'midat mishpat. This is pogea. V'al ken ne'enash Shaul. Shaul was punished mipnei shepaga b'mishpat. The real way of mishpat, of legal situations, is that somebody who was pogea, he's got to be ma'ask mechila. Shaul jumped ahead. Oh, you jump ahead? That's not a good deal. Shemachal terem shivakshu mimenu mechila. ויוצא מזה חידוש דין להלוכה, שאסור למחול קודם שיבקשו ממנו מחילה. You're not allowed to pardon somebody before he's pardoned somebody, before he's asked your permission. מפני שמוכרחים לקיים משפט. Somebody who shames you up in public, you've got every right not to be mochel him until he asks you mechila. This is what we learn from Shaul. And Shaul, because he was such a tzaddik, because he was such a what's it called? He gave up too quickly. That Rabbi Sai is not the way to behave. So we have two concepts here. One, a king doesn't have the right to do it, and nobody has the right to do it. Nobody has the right to be moichel somebody unless he's asked you mechila. Right. One more stage in this story. Okay? Now, we'll leave it at that. Okay. Questions? I'm sure people have got questions. Yes, Harold.
Yeah, it would seem that this view of Chazal and Rashi, the war against Ammon does not appear to be a punishment at all. In fact, it appeared to be an opportunity. It was Shaul's opportunity to demonstrate his skill, his leadership, his power, and so lavdafka a punishment.
I agree with you. The Chazal take it in a different way.
Right, so it doesn't make sense, I'm saying.
Wait, listen, you can learn it in however many different ways. That is the story. Okay? Okay? That's the story. Okay? Now, you can learn it your way. You can learn it the other way. Okay? There's no proof either or. Okay? And that's the problem with a written text. That's the problem when you learn Tanakh. Okay? Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chayim. That's what it is here. You saw the way the Ralbag builds it up, and you say the way Chazal build it up. Okay? Is it right? Let me give you an example. Okay? Is a leader, okay? If HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants Shaul to be a leader, okay, why do it through a war? I'm sure HaKadosh Baruch Hu could have found many different ways that the people would have accepted Shaul. So correct, the Ralbag brings the pasuk of Vayitein Oz L'Malko as a, what's it called, as a proof to this theory. The only way Shaul could build up his authority is if he leads people to war. Okay, I could have given many other different options.
No, but in a historical context, in the ancient world,
we're talking about a Torah world, Harold.
Well, that's
we're not talking about a.
But 3,000 years ago, the measure of.
I agree with you. I agree with you. I agree with you. I'm not saying it isn't. Okay.
Yeah. Today it wouldn't be.
But both explanations can be correct. Right. Anybody else who's Harold?
Say today it's diplomacy.
Today's diplomacy, exactly.
3,000 years ago it was
war.
War. So
I agree. Okay, I'm not arguing. I give it. Listen, guys, you've known me long enough. I'm a pluralist. I can take many different explanations and put them all in their context because I think they're multiple truths. Multiple truths.
Yes.
Okay, and every dimension, every truth gives a different dimension, a different Musar Haskel. It gives us a different way of looking at things. Okay, the concept of not being moichel somebody before a person is vakesh mechila is also a true concept. It's a true concept. Okay, somebody. Okay, and lawyers will know that, and business people will know that, and parents will know that. Are you moichel your children before they've asked you, I did something wrong, I'm sorry? Okay, that's the expectations. That person goes through a process of thinking that he did something wrong and he needs to apologize. The other guy said, forget about it already. Now, what does that do? If you're a teacher, if you're a principal, I've forgotten about it already. What does that mean? It means you don't want to give authority. Now, moichel without, what's it called, lowers your authority. So I'm saying there are multiple truths in every single explanation. Yes, Phil, you wanted to say something? You're mute.
I was thinking about Shaul's relationship with David HaMelech.
Oh, that's next year.
Sorry?
That's next year.
Well, we're talking about Shaul this year. And we know that if we're looking for a brave man, but a very forgiving type of fellow, that was not Shaul with David.
Right. Okay. 1 minute. Let me just explain. What's it called? Sorry. Let me just see if it's here. Okay. Obviously, that's one of the feelings that when a person gives up quickly to things, then it's a roundabout. What happens to you comes around. You are moichel too quickly, I will show you what happens. Okay? That means correct. Shaul's failing is multiple failings because of all these things together.
Yeah.
Okay? It's multiple personality. It's a Shakespearean, Rabbi say, Shaul is like a Shakespearean tragedy. Okay? But at the beginning of the story, we see the tragedies of Shaul. How he's quiet, how he's moichel, how he behaves, etc., etc., etc. And his failing is that he follows the people too much. And he's quickly to moichel. And what does HaKadosh Baruch Hu do to him? He shows him, if you're moichel too quickly, then I'll show you what's going to happen to you, etc., etc., etc. It's a multiple. It's a tragedy of a tragedy of a tragedy, and that's what the Tanakh is telling us.
But that means that Hashem, lahavdil, made a bad choice.
Pardon?
So I said that indicates that Hashem, I hate to say it, lahavdil, made a bad choice.
Listen, you're asking a question of Yedian Bechira. Okay, Shaul, if he would have chosen a different way of behavior, this wouldn't have happened.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that means the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows doesn't interfere with the free choice of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So at that period, Shaul was the ideal, was in the way of the Ralbag explains it, he was the ideal personality. He was somebody who wanted the authority to come from the people. And that was correct. But on the other hand, he didn't deal with opposition in the correct way. That means there are two things. He wanted the authority to come from the people, but on the other hand, he didn't know how to deal with opposition properly. And he was moichel them. According to Chazal, he was moichel them. Vahika macharish means he was moichel them. Now that's a dangerous thing for anybody to do. Okay, so you have multiple, what's it called? The sowing of the seeds of the rule of Shaul. We already see the failings in the beginning.
Generally speaking, how many kings of Israel were meant decent?
Sorry?
I think, how many kings of Israel would you say filled the bill? Even Shlomo had a big harem.
I am not the one to judge anybody.
Okay, it's not
okay,
your
we
fault.
can't listen, I'll give you an example, okay, and I'll just finish off with this statement. There is a fascinating Gemara in Masechet Sanhedrin, which tells us of a dream of Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi has a dream. Sorry. The Gemara starts off this way. They ask in the yeshiva, Rav Ashi says in yeshiva, tomorrow I'm going to give you a shiur on our on our friend Menashe, the king. Okay? Menashe was one of the worst kings, the son of Chizkiyahu HaMelech. The Gemara tells us that Menashe appears to Rav Ashi that night in a dream. And he says to him, you called me your friend? I'll ask you a few questions. Give him a list of questions, which halachic questions. And Rav Ashi, the author of Talmud Bavli, doesn't know the answers. Doesn't know the answers to the questions.
Mm-hmm.
After finishing off that part, Menashe says to him, and you call me a friend? So he says to him, Rav Ashi says to Menashe, he says, what do you mean? He says, why do you worship Avodah Zorah? If you knew so much Torah, why did you worship Avodah Zorah? So he said, if you would have been living in my generation, you'd have been crawling on the floor after the Avodah Zorah. Now, let's take this, move it over to 2021. Okay? Move it over to 2021. Okay? What is the Avodah Zorah in our generation? The The Avodah Zarah in our generation, now what takes off people's minds from davening? And I've told you this before.
Read.
This.
Yeah.
Instagram, WhatsApp, Facebook, everything which is in this little machine. This is the greatest Avodah Zarah. This is the greatest Avodah Zarah. And everybody is crawling on the floor to get a picture in the Instagram, in the Facebook, on the WhatsApp, in the news, everything. How many, what do they call it? How many people are following you? Now, Rabbi Sai, we're not talking, so therefore when you speak about different periods, I've got no way of judging people. I don't know what they fight for. I don't know what happens. There's a perspective of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and there's our perspective. Okay? In the perspective of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that's one way of looking at things. You're asking my perspective. I can only go, and I've given you multiple perspectives in Shaul. I've tried to. Multiple. Okay? And they can all be correct. So who are we to judge who was the best one in the period which each person lives? That's why I'm learning with you Tanakh. Personalities in Tanakh.
That's a limud that is very important and worthwhile, because every generation has its own yisurim.
Every generation has its own battles. Every generation. Okay?
But we do believe ultimately there's still a right and a wrong.
Obviously, but the ratio of right and wrong is also relative. Okay? I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example. Okay? I was reading this book. Okay, I've got to tell you about it now. Let me just get the name of the book in front of me. Okay, it's called The East-West Street. Okay, The East-West Street is written by a famous professor of law, and he speaks about his family during the war in Lemberg, in Lvov. Okay, and it's an amazing book because it gives us insights into the legal aspects of the Nuremberg trials. Now, the Nuremberg trials was the first trial ever where an outside power judges Germany. What was the right of the German people, Hitler, Yamach Shemoy V'Zichroi, to behave the way he did within the framework of war? Now, they needed to create a new constitution. The concept of genocide is dealt with there, which is a new concept. Genocide is a new concept. It only began in the 1930s. Okay, this book speaks about the individual rights of a human being and the concept of genocide and how they were going to judge the Nuremberg trials, and what were the premise of Nuremberg trials. Okay, now the concept of right and wrong changes within now we have the Torah, we don't have any problems. Okay, but the right and wrong concept is, let me give you an example. Okay, Phil, a child, okay, let's go into a bit deeper. The famous book of Victor Hugo, Les Miserables. Okay, Jean Valjean steals from a bakery.
Yeah.
Right or wrong, not for himself, not for any other reason, has a starving wife and children. Right or wrong?
Rav Kanai gave a share on that 3 or 4 years ago. That exact scenario.
Okay, right. Okay, agreed. Every rabbi would. Okay, but I'm trying to learn it from the Tanakh. Okay, so right and wrong is relative. Okay, how we judge Shaul. Shaul as a human being, Shaul as a leader. What are the powers of a leader to change his psyche. Okay, and that's why I chose multiple explanations for the what's it called, the personality of Shaul. Okay, Emir Hashem, you're going for a break a bit from me. Okay, we'll come back. We'll carry on afterwards with the failings of Shaul from the personality aspect, not from the historical, the personality. Okay, guys.
Okay.
I just want to show you, this is
Be
my,
well and have an easy fast.
I don't
Thanks,
have,
everybody
I don't
keep
have
well.
a Zara. I don't
What do
have,
you say?
I said, this is my phone. It's just a little rectangle. It's not a smartphone. No, I'll go to Zara.
It's a
Shkoyach,
very funny
Harold.
coincidence. I also have a phone that just,
That's right. Phil and I, we only have these flip phones. You can't do WhatsApp. You can't do Facebook. You can't do anything. All you can do is talk to
Can I
somebody.
tell you, Harold, if I wouldn't have my phone, you wouldn't get your source sheet.
I realize. I realize.
Okay.
But,
Right.
yeah.
Be well, everybody. Look after yourselves
well,
and have a
everybody.
Okay. Easy fast.
Bye.
Okay. Shkoyach. All right. Till Elul.
Yeah.
Bye.